Hey folks, welcome back for another live stream here on the Riffomonas channel as part of the series of videos I call Code Club. In today's episode, we are going to be recreating this figure that I found on the YouGov website. YouGov has a lot of really interesting polling data from everything about politics to card games. So I'm naturally in the United States, and so the card games that I'm most familiar with, of course, are games from the United States. As we get going here, I'd love for you to add to the comments, to the chat thread, what card games you enjoy playing the most. Are there special card games where you live? I know that this video really attracts a very diverse and international audience, and so I'd love hearing the names of the games that you all are playing wherever you live. So this is a plot, like I said, that was presented by YouGov. It is what I would call a horizontal stacked bar chart. If you kind of turn it, let me see if I can do this actually. If you turn it like that, this is a stacked bar plot. A lot of my research is in the microbiome world, and people in the microbiome world absolutely love these types of plots. I absolutely hate these types of plots because when you get more than perhaps 5 different colors like this, it's pretty hard to see the differences in colors and then to link it back to the legend, right? So that's one reason I don't like it. Another reason I don't like them is that, say the variable or the group that you're really interested in is the not sure. Well, it's very difficult, I would not be sure, how not sure varies across these different groups, right? But what's nice about this version of the plot is that they have everything with a common anchor point on the left side of the x-axis, right? And so for their title, Most Americans Love or Like Card Games They've Played, this works fairly well, right? So for the love, this dark purple, it's got a common left anchor. And so then they could then sort the different categories by the level of love it, right? So one thing that I find a little bit odd is that the title is Love or Like, yet they've sorted by love, right? So I would think maybe it would have been better to sort by the sum of love and like, right? And in that case, solitaire, which is like, I wouldn't say the most boring, but the most solitary game there is, right? 89% of people who have played solitaire like it or love it. I think this is a social commentary, if nothing else. My favorite game is Spades, which is great to see. Has a lot of people enjoy that. I live in the Midwest here in Michigan, and euchre is a very popular game in the Midwest. All my cousins know how to play euchre because they grew up in Illinois. I grew up in Missouri, and in Illinois and the upper Midwest here, euchre is a very popular game. I would love to learn how to play euchre, but I just haven't gotten there. So anyway, lots of good games. War, which isn't the most boring, but perhaps the most pointless game there is because it's just random, right? So anyway, all sorts of good games. I'm sad to see Old Maid coming in last here, as well as Go Fish. I know my kids absolutely love those games. Anyway, enough about the card games. What I want to talk about is how we can make this plot. Again, it is a stacked bar plot, but it has the axes reversed from what we're used to seeing, right? And so we're going to do this in ggplot within R. And so immediately start thinking about geomes and the type of geomes that we're going to use to represent this plot. And so to make a stacked bar plot, we could use geom_col. And on the x-axis, we could put the percent of people who like it, love it, not sure, dislike it, or hate it. On the y-axis then, we could put the different games. We could also then use geom text to indicate the numbers, right? The numbers within each of those categories. We'll also have to use a different x-axis coordinate, I think, to indicate where those numbers should go within each of the bars. And I think that's going to be an interesting challenge. Another interesting challenge about these numbers is that for love it and like it and hate it, the color is white, whereas for not sure and dislike, it's black, okay? The other thing that you'll notice is that when the percent is below 4%, they don't show the number, right? So like this right here might be 3%, but they don't show it in part because the wedge gets kind of small. And because it's not so interesting, right? Like it's a pretty small number, okay? So great to see on here, DIY Indo. Welcome, Saeed Jama from Somalia. Great. And Rents coming back from his holiday to be joining us as well. So great. Great to have you. Some of the other interesting things would be things like the legend is across the top, right? Normally with ggplot, you get it kind of in the right-hand margin. So here they have it in the top margin between the subtitle and the plot. Something I think is pretty cool is that the love and like within the title are the same color as the bars in the stacked bar plot. That's cool. Some little things like the names of the games are right justified rather than left justified. Cool, right? And I'm sure there'll be other things that we get into as we kind of dig into this, but yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So for those of you that are new to the channel, I just want to show you a couple things. So first off, you can learn a lot about R and other reproducible research practices through our website at riffomonas.org. I have a variety of different training modules that you can check out. Also, I have a mailing list. So about once a week, maybe every other week in the summer, I send out a newsletter talking about different data visualizations at kind of a 30,000 foot view, not getting into the details of code, but kind of thinking about strategy and overall approach or things that I find interesting about different plots. And so that is what we did now about 26 days ago, I guess. So it's been a while, where I talked about this same visualization and kind of the different things that I thought were interesting and that, you know, I would be thinking about as I go about making the plot. Some of the things I've already talked about in kind of my rant about stacked bar plots. Something else that I will tell you about is that I have various upcoming workshops. The one that I'm excited to be announcing is this Transform Your Data Visualizations workshop. This one is going to be over 5 weeks. Each week we'll meet for 2 hours on a Thursday or Friday morning, Eastern time. There's not going to be any coding involved. What I'm going to be doing is going over kind of best practices and ideas around data visualization. And then we are going to be taking your plots and other plots that we find out in the wild, say in the media or the scientific literature, and begin to kind of critique them in the hope of making them better, right? And so I find that oftentimes when we start adding code to things, people get confused or frustrated. And really what's most important is the ability to kind of design a visual, even if it's with like, you know, pen and paper. Then once you kind of have something down, then you can begin to think about, well, how would I actually implement this regardless of the tool? The tool really doesn't matter. So let me go ahead and put some of these in the chat box here. That way you'll have those links. And I'll also go ahead and put in the link to the newsletter. And then I will also go ahead and put in the link to the YouGov site. I don't think I need all this extra stuff. And that way you can follow along and see what I'm doing as we go through things, okay? So by all means, as we go through, feel free to say hi, tell us where you're coming from, tell me what your favorite card game is, and feel free to ask any questions or give any suggestions of things you would like me to try or perhaps do differently. Hi, Ekshunya. Thanks for joining us. Sorry if I mispronounce people's names. It's not intentional, but like I said, I'm from the Midwest, and we also say things kind of weird compared to other people here in the United States. All right, so let's go ahead and head over to our studio, and we'll get going thinking about today's video and how we're going to go ahead and make this visualization, okay? So something I did in the last episode that I thought was pretty helpful was to begin to think about outlining and kind of getting a flow for how we're going to go through recreating this visual, right? So I'm going to do this with comments. So the first thing we're going to do is get the data from YouGov, and we'll want to think about formatting data to work, whatever that means. Thinking about things like order of preferences, right? So going from love it, like it, not sure, dislike, hate, right? And then order of loving, right? So again, going from spit or speed which is a game actually I don't know, all the way down to Old Maid, right? How do we get that order correct, right? And then there might be some other, I'll just say, data cleanup. Okay. So the next thing that we'll want to do is create a stacked bar plot. I'll say it's a horizontal, right? We'll perhaps also, while we're thinking about that stacked bar plot, implement the color scheme for bars and format / place legend, right? And then we'll go ahead and think about inserting numbers into bars. And then, and with this, we're going to want to also color the numbers accordingly, right? And then I think the fifth thing we'll do is things like the title, the subtitle, and the caption. And so then we'll do titles and other formatting. Okay. So again, this is kind of a high level view of where we're going to go to recreate this data visualization. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us from the UK again. Great to have you all. All right. So that's the strategy. Let's dig into finding the data. Of course, I could manually transcribe all this data, but that wouldn't be so fantastic, right? So I'm going to come back to the website, and there's a link here for new polling by YouGov. So I'm going to click on that, and this then gets us the data from the YouGov website, right? And this is the data that went into making the visualization. They have a number of initial questions, and then the question of, have you ever played the following games? And so I should point out that this is out of 1,000 US adult citizens, right? So that's maybe why like Go Fish does so poorly, because they're not asking a bunch of 8-year-olds, right? And so there's a number of games in here. So there's a couple in here actually that they didn't include in the plot, right? So like Whist and Zwickeren were not in this plot, right? And again, down here at the bottom, it says includes card games which are at least 100 respondents said they'd ever played, right? So if they asked 1,000 people and 4% said they'd played it, that's like 40 people, right? So that's not gonna show up, right? And so this isn't the data we want. This is actually the data. Let's see, that's this plot here, right? And so what we want is the data for this plot, right? And so if we come down further, we now find this table, right? And so we have love it, like it, dislike it, hate it, not sure. And then we have all these different games. And we see that like Whist and Zwickeren are in here already, or in here still, right? And so we'll probably have to do something to remove them. But the data is in the worst, I wouldn't say the worst possible format. The worst possible format would be an image file, right? I once asked someone to send me some data that I was expecting from them, and they sent me a screenshot that they took with their camera. And so that was painful. Thankfully, there wasn't a whole lot of data in that picture, but in that case, that was pretty painful, right? So what we can do, I think, with this PDF is I can copy this, and I'm going to open up a new, let's say a text file, and then I can paste this in, right? And so I'm going to do some work here to get this to be the type of data I want it to be, so that I could work with it in ggplot. Okay. So again, this is under this first category of data cleanup, right? So we've got the data from YouGov. Now we need to clean it up so that we can work with it here in R. Okay. So ultimately, what we're going to want to do is make this a tribble, right? And then love it, like it, and then dislike it. These are all going to be column headings, which I'm going to separate with commas and wrap in quotes. And then we'll also need a comma at the end of this. And to indicate that these are column headings, pretty sure I need a tilde. I'm having a moment of self-doubt on that, but I think that's right. We'll go ahead and do that. And if we want to check that everything works, I can go ahead and copy this. I have to load the tidyverse first, right? And if I paste that in, I see that I then have a tibble with 0 rows and 5 columns. Love it, like it, dislike it, hate it, not sure. And then within those less than, greater than signs, it's got question marks because it doesn't know what type of data are there. Okay. So Rents mentions the package Tabula PDF to get tables from a PDF. Cool. I'll have to check that out. I think for today, though, I'm going to run with this. And let's go ahead and I'm going to wrap these in quotes. And actually, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So one of the things that's really nice in RStudio is that you have the ability to use regular expressions. And so regular expressions show up with like the string-r package. That's very common across all programming languages. So there's a fairly similar syntax that you would use to get different substrings, right? So if I do like a caret, that's not a caret, that's a caret, that's going to match at the beginning of the line. And then I can go ahead and match any non-numeric data, right? And so that's a \d. A numeric character would be \d, followed by a star. And then we see that that is going to match this canasta space, because that space isn't a numeric value, followed then by a numeric value, right? So if I put a space in here, why isn't that showing up? Let's see. If we do next, that's getting that. I do \s. Oh, that's matching the space, right? Because that's becoming part of the regular expression. Okay, so what I want to do then is to match that, and yeah, let's try that. And what I could do then is wrap this in parentheses, right? And then replace it with \1. And I'm going to put a space to the left of that. And then the \1, I'm going to wrap in quotes with a comma. So what I think is going to happen is it's going to match a non-numeric string at the beginning of the line that has a space at the end of the string, right? And then it's going to wrap what's in the parentheses, it's going to save that, if you will, into slot 1. And so then I can wrap that in quotes, comma, and because I'm removing or matching a space here, I want to also put in a space there. So let's go ahead and do replace all, and that actually worked, right? It kind of screwed up on the first line here. That's fine, I'll forgive it. And so now what we have, right, is it replaced that initial string to put it in quotes and then to put a comma after it, right? Cool. All right. Now what we can do is let's go ahead and remove those % signs, and we can find replace all. Those go away. Great. And then what we could do is we can then again match \d, and I'm going to use a plus sign to match a numeric character that's 1 or more values long, okay? And that then I'm going to do \1, comma, and what that should do is put a comma after each digit, right? Welcome, Philippe from Brazil. Great to have you. So now we go ahead and run that, and now we see that all of our numbers have commas after them, right? Including the number at the very end. And so that's great. So I think this is everything we need. I want to remove this final parentheses here in Tribble. Maybe tab that over, and then we'll go ahead and put a closing parentheses on all of this. I'm going to copy that, and I'm then going to plop that into here, and that should be good. Yeah, so let's go ahead and run this, and it is unhappy. Can't create column, love it. Oh, why not? let's come back. So I think what I'll do, because I just plopped in a whole bunch of data and I'm not sure why it's not working, is I'm going to try the first 2 lines, okay? So something like this. So that doesn't work. So data must be rectangular. Found 5 columns, found 6 cells. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know why? Because I don't have a column for the game, right? So I need to have a game, okay? And so I need quotes around these column headings because there's a space in them, right? I don't need a quote around game, although it won't hurt anything, but just to prove it to you, let me go ahead and run this now. And it's not happy about this extra comma down here. So let's try this again. Very good. Now that works, right? Now we've got the game and the 5 different categories. I'm going to go ahead and remove that closing parenthesis. Now when we run it, great. We get a 30 by 6 tibble with love it, like it, dislike it, hate it, not sure. Cool. All right. So we now have our data into R, right? And now we want to format the data to get it to work. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And so what we're going to do is this data is what's called wide, right? I'm thinking ahead to how I'm going to plot this, that I'm going to want to put game on the y-axis, these percentages on the x-axis, and then my fill is going to be these different column headers. So to do that, each of those variables needs to be its own column, right? So currently it's wide, but we want to make it long or tidy. And to do that, we can do pivot longer, okay? And so we'll go ahead and pipe that to pivot underscore longer. And we're going to take everything except for the game column. And I'll do names to, and I'll say sentiment. And then values to, I'll say percent. Okay. And so now you'll see that we have game, sentiment, and percent. Awesome. That is in the correct order, or the correct columns, which I could then go ahead and pipe this to ggplot, AES. On the x-axis, we want the percent, the y, the game, the fill, the sentiment, and then we're going to do a geom call. Okay. And then I've got this gg save statement here to go ahead and output things to the right width and height to match what they had in their original. And I need to go ahead and open that up. And yeah. Great. So this is their version. And so far, this is my version, right? And let me get them to be the same size. Great. And so, you know, we don't have to see both of them at the same time to know that we're not there, right? So there's a couple things that I notice. So first off, I notice that not everything adds up to 100, right? And that's because the values in here are rounded numbers. They're integers, right? Whereas those are probably rounded numbers, right? If you had 1,000 people, there's going to be some rounding. And so some of these, I think, add to 99. Some add to 101. Maybe this blackjack is 98 even, right? And so we're going to have to rescale those percentages to get them to add up to 100, okay? So that's one thing to think about. Maybe I'll go ahead and put that in here of things we want to get to work, right? All right. Again, it doesn't matter how you make your outline, just that you make an outline. And we need to scale or rescale the numbers, okay? And maybe I'll do that before I reorder things. So order of preference, the order of loving, right? And so like the preference, the sentiment, right, is alphabetized, right? So it goes D, H, L, N, right? Whereas we want it to be love it, like it, not sure, dislike, hate, right? So that's not alphabetical, but that's the order we're going to want things to go in. So we'll have to kind of reorder the sentiments. And yeah, And then we also need to reorder the different games. The games are in here alphabetically going up from the x-axis to the top of the y-axis, up to the top of the y-axis, right? And we want it to be reordered by the level of love, right? Okay, so those are 3 things we need to work on. So let's start by rescaling the numbers, okay? And yeah, so we've got this as percent, and I think what we're ultimately going to want to do is have 2 columns for the label, right? We're going to want one for the label and one for the percent. So like if we look at this cribbage, this is a place where we have all 5 values. So 26 plus 49 is 75, 86, 96, 100. So that adds up to 100, okay? Bridge, 63, 78, 96, 100. That adds up to 100, all right? Let's see, Pinochle, 69, 82, 96, plus 3, 99, right? So Pinochle, these numbers are the rounded numbers, but they don't add up to 100, right? So we could see that if we come up here for like, yeah, Pinochle, right? That these numbers don't add up to 100. And really, we could take this, and let's kind of get away from ggplot for right now. We could do summarize total equals sum on percent, and then we could do dot by equals game. And so here you'll see then the various games. So like blackjack adds up to 100 on down, right? And so some are at 101, some are 99, but those labels are rounded, right? And so what I'm going to want is to have a label. And so maybe I'll make this label instead of percent. And then what we'll do is a mutate to get percent to be then label divided by the sum of label. And then we'll do that by game. Okay. And so now what we see is that we have, so like blackjack, we have these values, and those are slightly different than what's in the label, right? And of course, we could multiply it by 100 to get the percent. And then we could remove that summarize, or actually we could take that summarize and we could then add that into the pipeline where we're summing the percent by game. And this then adds up to 100, right? Everything adds up to 100 and we're in good shape, okay? So what I'm doing here again is that we've got the percent, which is what we're going to map to the x-axis, and the label, which we're going to then use to label those different bars, right? So like this number, this 57 is going to come from the label column, whereas the position is going to come from the percent column, okay? Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. All right. So let's go ahead then and add this in to our ggplot. And so now we should have that flush right-hand side. And sure enough, we now have that flush right-hand side. Okay, cool. All right. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and order the preferences, right? Or as I've called it, sentiments. And normally I probably would have like relabeled these titles to be like love, like, dislike, hate, not sure. But let's roll with this because I think that's how a lot of people end up working with the data. And so we're going to want to go ahead and add in here another mutate. And I've got this by in here, which is giving me a little bit of pause to think about. I don't think that matters, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take game and we're going to make it a factor on game. And then we're going to have levels, which we're going to define with a vector, okay? And so then in here, for the levels, I'm going to put in the levels in the order I want them. So we're going to do love it, like it, not sure, and maybe I'll go down a line, dislike it, and then hate it, okay? So what this should do is this should put our individual bars within each of these into love, like, not sure, dislike, hate. We'll see. And that did not work. And I think that is probably because we did it by game. Oh, sorry. I did game rather than sentiment. We just started and my brain's already going foggy on me. All right. So we want the sentiment to be a factor, not the game. All right. Let's try this again. Cool. Now we have love, like, not sure, dislike, hate, the correct order in the sentiment, but the love is on the right, and the hate is on the left. And so I think it's probably putting hate down first, dislike, not sure, like, love. So let's go to geom call. And let me get my face out of the way, and we'll look at this documentation. And what I'm thinking about is this position stack, right? And I'm going to come down to position. So let's try the function position underscore stack. Yep. And so I see that there's vjust equals 1 and reverse equals false. I bet that's the argument. If true, we'll reverse the default stacking order. Okay. So let's go ahead into geom call, and we'll do position equals position stack, and reverse equals true. And so I think this will get things to be flipped. And sure enough, we now have love it on the left side, like it, not sure, dislike, hate. Okay, cool. So we have gotten our sentiments into the right order. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to alter the order of the games, right? And to be in the order of the love it column, right? And so let's go ahead and we're going to do that with another mutate making a factor. But I'm going to do that before the pivot longer. And I'm going to do that because I want to use the love it column to order the data, right? And so maybe what I'll do first is arrange, and we'll do love it. Let's see if that works. And so let's see, love it is here. That didn't work. Let's do these backticks. I don't usually work with names that have spaces in them. Okay, and so my knowledge of the syntax is a little bit foggy. So that's good for me to be doing this, right? So now we have going in an ascending sort for each of the games by the love it, right? So old maid is first. If I were to do like DESC, a descending sort, then we would have spit or speed at the first, right? And I think what I will do is I'm going to leave it with an ascending sort on love it, because the way this plot works is it puts the first thing down at the bottom of the y-axis and then the last thing at the top of the axis, right? So if I'm doing an ascending sort, that old maid will go at the bottom, and then spit or speed will go up at the top, okay? So let's then go ahead and do a mutate. We got to pipe that into mutate. Mutate on game to make it a factor on game. And then we'll do levels equals, and that then is going to be the order of things in the game column, right? So again, we're taking our tibble, we're ordering the rows by the value in the love it column, and then we're turning game, that first column, into a factor, and we're setting the order of the games, not alphabetically, but by the order that's currently in the game column, right? So we're making that a factor, we're basically forcing R to use our order rather than the alphabetical order. And then as it kind of comes through, we will find that even though we do these like pivot longers and whatnot, game will still be a factor. So let me go ahead and run everything except for the ggplot part. And so now we see that game is a factor, right? That's what FCT means. And sentiment is a factor, okay? And then now when we run this, we now see that we have speed or spit at the top, old maid at the bottom, and things are ordered by whether or not people love it, right? So, cool. One other thing that I'm thinking about is that there are cases like where there's a tie, right? So like euchre and spades and spoons and hold'em, blackjack and cribbage. It appears to be ordering things first by love it and then alphabetically by the name of the game, right? So like Crazy Eights and Go Fish. But some of these things I noticed that even though it's got the same number for love it, if we zoom in, so say like we have blackjack and cribbage here, that you'll notice those lines don't line up. And that's again because they're scaling it to 100%. And so again, similarly, like if we look at, was it blackjack and cribbage, so we have a problem. And that problem is that we are sorting by the label rather than by the percent, right? Yeah, and also there's some games in here that Rents is noticing that aren't in the original. So let's go ahead and maybe let's start by removing things that aren't in the original. So like Kemp's, whist, and pitch can be removed. So I'm going to comment those out. And then whist and pitch. So spit, solitaire, pinochle, hand and foot needs to go away. I've never heard of many of these games. I've heard of whist and pitch, but not hand and foot. BS, euchre, Texas Hold'em, spoons, pity pat we don't have. I've never heard of that. Has anyone played these games before? And then let's see, cribbage is in there, blackjack, gin rummy, poker, Zwickren needs to go away, as does 31. And we'll go ahead and get rid of that comma. And 31. Let's see. So that then leaves pyramid, poker, war, 7-card stud, canasta, hearts, bridge, kings in the corner, go fish, crazy eights, old maid. Cool. All right. So things are in the correct order by the label, but not by the actual percent of people that love it, right? And so let's see. So Mike says, sorted by the like after the love. Is that what they're doing? I don't think so, because like spoons and Texas Hold'em, it goes 54, 53, whereas, I don't know. It's hard to see. It's a bit of a mess. What I'm going to go for is I want to sort by the actual percent and then by the name, okay? And so right now I'm doing it by the label rather than by the actual percent. And so so this isn't going to work the way I want it to work, right? And so I'm going to, so what I could do, right, is I could come down to calculate this percent. I could pivot wider. Would that work? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the percent of people who love it. I think I'm going to work with it in a wide format, okay? Yeah. So there's a factor reorder, and that would, I think I've gotten factor reorder to work for one variable, but I'm not totally sure how to do it for two variables. Actually, let's try that. Let's try that. Okay. So let's go ahead and remove those two lines of code, and let's see what we have through here. Right. So turning off the plotting, we have the game as a character, the sentiment, the label, the percent. Okay. So sentiment is a factor. And so now what we want to do is let's go ahead and I think I need another mutate. So do mutate game equals FCT reorder. And then we'll put in here game. And then we're going to reorder by see, here's the problem, is that I want it to be by the percent that love it. So that's not going to work. Okay, let me think of it a different way. Okay, so if I comment that out, this is what our data looks like. And so I think what I want to do is to let's see. I'm gonna make a separate set of columns for the percents. Okay, so let's go ahead and change this to love, like, dislike, hate, unsure. Okay, so again, this then gets us nice names. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to nest the data. So we'll do nest everything but game. And this is going to make a label tibble, right? And so now we've got, for each game, we've got a 1x5 tibble that's got that label, okay? So hang with me for a minute if this doesn't immediately make sense. And then we'll do a mutate to make a percent column. And to calculate the percent column, we're going to use a map. So we'll use map DBL, I think. And that then is going to map over the label column. And we will take, and so this is the .x argument, as you can see in this yellow pop-up here, right? And so what I can then do is .x $love divided by sum of x. And maybe I'll go ahead and multiply all this by 100. And that is not happy. Oh, why aren't you happy? Oh, .x. Does that work? No, that doesn't work. Maybe what we'll do is we'll do function, or can make an anonymous function like this, right? And then here I will not use .x, I'll use x. There we go. And so that then gets us the percent of people that love it. So if I remove the $love, we get that. So let's make this map. Now what we get is a list where we've got 1 row and 5 columns. And so let me back up and just say what I've done here, right? So again, we have this tibble that's got 6 columns. It's got the game in the first column, and then the love it, like it, not sure, dislike it, hate it columns. And so that's wide, but those are the labeled values. But I want it to be by the percent, where I've rescaled things to be a total of 100%. So what I then did was to nest the data that's not in the game column. So everything that's not in the game column now becomes kind of like a sub-tibble within the label column, right? Then what we can do is we can then use map to iterate over the values in the label column. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take that label column, which is what I have here, and apply it then into this function where we have 100 times x, so that's each of those 5 columns, divided by the sum of all those columns together, gets us then a tibble with 2 columns that are made up of tibbles, right? And so then what we could do would be like unnest percent, and now what we get are the percents for that love, like, dislike, hate, and unsure, okay? But I want the label data also, right? So I'm going to look at the help for unnest to see if there's a way to put a prefix on the names, right? And so there's a name sep. So let's see what that does. If null, the default outer names will come from the inner names. If a string, the outer names will be formed by pasting together the outer and the inner column names. So I think the outer would be like label and percent, and then the inner would be like love, like, dislike, hate, unsure. So I think what I could do would be unnest C on label and percent, and then we'll do names sep equals, I'm going to put in a hyphen. And so now what we get is we get label love, label like, label dislike, and so forth, right? And then we have the percents, okay? Hanging with me? Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and arrange this by percent love, right? Oh, maybe I shouldn't use a hyphen. Let's use an underscore, because the hyphen is a minus sign, right? So let's use that name separator to be an underscore. Percent love not found. Okay, it's not happy. So, oh, that's because I forgot to put a pipe at the end of this. All right, there we go. And so now we have percent love, and again, old maid is at the top, and I could pipe this to tail, and it should be speed or spit. Yeah, that's at the bottom, spit, right, at 38%. Okay, and that's sorting again on this percent love column. All right, so now we can then feed this into our mutate with our game being a factor, the levels being, yeah, by game, right? And we'll come back and get the sorting by the name within the game, right? That makes sense, right? And so if we run this, we now have game as a factor. And now what we want to do is we want to pivot longer, everything but game. And so we're going to then have the names to the sentiment, the values to the label. But I want, let's see, if we run just this, let's see what happens, okay? This gives us the game, the sentiment, and the label. But I'd like to have separate columns for label percent and for the sentiment, right? So this is not something I do a whole lot. So let's look at the help for pivot longer. And names to, there's a names sep, okay? So I think I can put that name sep equals underscore and get back separate columns, okay? So hopefully you're hanging with me here. It's a little into the weeds. We'll do names sep equals underscore, and can't be used with length 1 names 2. So we have sentiment. So we'll do type and sentiment. And so now what we get is we get the game, the type, the sentiment, and the label, okay? And I think what we'll do then is to pivot wider now to get the type to be separate columns, right? So we'll do names from equals type, values from equals label. Oh, this should have been like number, right? Or value, okay? All right, let's try that now. Okay, now what we have are the label, the percent, And that, I think, looks good. Let's go down to the tail. Nope, I put that in the wrong place. Let's see. Let's just go ahead and print it all. All right. So now what we see is that we have our game in the first column, right? And that's ordered in ascending order of love by percent, I think. Let's double check that. Yep, percent love. And then we can see that for some of these, the label and the percent is different, again, because of that scaling to 100. Okay, great. All right. Where are we? Let's go ahead and remove this. And we've pivoted it wider. Now we need to redo the sentiment factor, right? And let's see. Yeah, so we want to reorder the sentiment column. And so sentiment is a factor, levels. I'm going to leave this here for now. And instead of levels, I'm going to make that labels, because we can use those labels and we can then tell it what levels go with those, right? So we can then do levels, and we can then do love, like, unsure, dislike, hate, and let's see. I'm not ready to run the whole thing, but we have this percent line here that we don't need. Yeah, we don't need this here, right? Because we already did that up above with the map. Okay. So then our X is going to be percent, Y the game, fill is the sentiment, and let's see what happens here. No error messages. Cool. And that looks right. We've ordered things by the percent rather than by the label, if that makes sense. And I think we're in good shape there. So now what we want to do, though, is to think about ordering things that have the same percent, right? So like spoons and Texas Hold'em, we're at 28%. So I'm going to come back here and do filter. What am I going to do? Game percent in, and we'll do Texas Hold'em or spoons. Oh, I think I misspelled Texas Hold'em. Oh, it's got that weird apostrophe thing. Let's see. So now we have Pinochle and Solitaire. Those are in the right order compared to what they had. Let's see. Let's do Goldfish, Go Fish, and Crazy Eights. Because I think that their Texas Hold'em has, I don't know, something weird in them. So we'll do Crazy Eights and Go Fish. Okay. And so we can see that these have the same percent love it, 14%, right? But I would prefer to have Crazy Eights go first, followed by Go Fish, right? So again, it's going alphabetical, but from bottom to top, right? So let's bring back our studio, and we can do that back up here with percent love. And then we'll do, within that, we'll do descending game, okay? So that should reverse the order of the games that have the same percent love. Oh, and I think I want to get rid of this filter line. And so now what we see is we have Crazy Eights, Go Fish, and then like Canasta, Hearts, 7-card stud. And this is a place where like they have slightly different results from me, but whatever. I think we could, I'm trying to apply a rule, right, which is to alphabetize for things that have the same percent love. I could use the exact same order they have, and I could do that again by ordering this tibble up here that I made to match theirs. And then I could have gotten rid of a lot of this stuff. And again, a lot of this stuff with the nest, mutate, unnest, arrange is to get things into the same order, to order things by the percent followed by the game in alphabetical order, if that helps, right? So that's what we're trying to do, okay? So all that to say, we now have things that are pretty close. Let's see, solitaire, BS, spades, and euchre are in a different order. When I zoom in on spades and euchre, spades goes out a little bit further than euchre, whereas their euchre goes out a little bit further than the spades. I'm going to assume that they have the error, not me. Or maybe someone could go look and see if they can figure out if I screwed up somewhere. Blackjack, cribbage, gin rummy, pyramid, poker, Omaha. Oh, Omaha shouldn't be in there. So we'll get rid of Omaha. And then war and those, right? So I need to remove Omaha. Let's get this back to the right size. And again, Omaha is another game I've never heard of before. There we go. All right. So at long last, I think we have accomplished step one. Get data from YouGov, clean it up, format the data to, quote, work, okay? We've also, along the ways, created a horizontal stacked bar plot, right? That's what we've got here, okay? Cool. So let's take a quick pause. Again, I know people come and go with these screencasts as we go along. And just as a reminder, I am trying to recreate this visual that came to us from YouGov. And again, it's showing US games that had at least 10% of the respondents. So they asked 1,000 people. So they asked at least 100 people had ever played the game before, what games they liked or loved, liked, not sure, disliked, and hated. And we're making this horizontal stacked bar plot. And again, for those of you who are new to the channel, I have this website called Riffomonas that is kind of a clearinghouse for a lot of the stuff I do here on YouTube, for different types of training modules if you want to learn R or other practices related to reproducible research. I also have a variety of workshops that I teach. I have one coming up starting at the beginning of September, working on how to improve your data visualization skills, doing it in a code-free approach where we're really going to focus on strategy and kind of overall design things to making compelling visualizations, okay? And it's going to be 5 weeks long, 2 hours once a week, so 10 total hours of interaction, and it should be very interactive with me and other people participating in the group, okay? And so I'll go ahead and plop this back in the chat for anyone that wants to check that out and learn more. And then I'll also go ahead and take this YouGov article that we're riffing off of and go ahead and paste that in. And by the way, the name Riffomonas, I just said, right? We're riffing off of, right? We're trying to, in music, when people talk about riffing, they take a theme from the music and they kind of riff on that to put together perhaps a song or a verse or some solo instrumental within the song. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is to take things that we learn from doing things like recreating this plot, which perhaps isn't useful to you at all, but it is useful because it's going to help you to learn these tools better and to think about what you like or don't like about different types of data visualizations, okay? So hopefully you find all that helpful. And so let's return to our studio. And we've talked about creating the horizontal stacked bar plot, so we've got that. Now what we want to do is implement the color scheme for the bars and format and place the legend, okay? And let's do that. We'll go ahead and grab theirs. And I should put this in my doc because I use it so often, but the application that I'm going to use is a digital color meter on a Mac. Windows has it as well, but if you go to Applications on a Mac and then Utilities and then Digital Color Meter right there in the middle, this allows me to hover over a color, and then I can do Shift Command C to copy it and get the hexadecimal. And so what we'll do is we'll come down here and I'll then do Scale Fill Manual. And so Scale Fill Manual will allow us to change the interior color of those bars. And I'll go ahead and do name equals null. And name equals null will get rid of this sentiment, right? And then we'll go ahead and put in our colors. So then the values will be a vector. And so if I paste that in, that's that first dark purple color. And then grabbing the next purple color, we'll go ahead and paste that in. And then this grayish color for the unsure. And then we'll go ahead and do the dislike. Too many windows open, toggling back and forth. All right, there we go. This lighter red, go ahead and copy that. And then we want the dark red for those that hate the game. All right. So now when we run this, this gets us our colors that match what they have, right? Let me get rid of my face because you don't need to see that to see this, right? So now we have the same colors for each of those different categories, right? Cool. Let's then go ahead and put the legend up on top to match what they have, okay? The original on the YouGov site is interactive. I think I may have noticed that. Like if you highlight over, yeah. And I'm sure that there's probably a way where I could go into the source here to then extract the numbers directly programmatically. I imagine that they did this with something like Data Wrapper or Plotly or something like that. But that's pretty cool. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me of that, Mike. Thanks. Nice. All right. So, yeah, so we've got the colors. Now we want to put the legend across the top. One of the nice things about putting the legend across the top is that this legend over on the right is using up a lot of real estate, right? And so it'd be nice to use the full width of the figure to show our data. And so by removing these, we can then use all this extra white space to stretch out things horizontally to show more data. And so we can then come in here and do theme, and we'll do legend.position equals top. And so now we have our legend across the top, right? And we can, I think by default, that is centered. Theirs is pretty clearly left justified, right? So then we can do legend.justification top equals left. And so then that pulls it to the left, okay? Cool, yeah? We can also go ahead and shrink the size of the key. So each of these symbols is called a key. And so we can then do legend.key size equals unit. And so that's a function. And then we can give it some value. And then I like to use points. So let's start with like 8 PT for 8 points. And so then that makes it smaller, right? And perhaps a little bit too small. Let's take that up to say 10. And I don't want to get too much into tweaking things. Let's try 12. And I think that, well, let's do 11. All right, and I'll call that good, okay? So there's more things we're gonna futz with as we go through here, but this certainly gets the legend where we want it. One thing I notice as I zoom in on the legend is that there's a gray background for each of these keys, right? And something that somebody asked me, I think in the last live stream I did, was why do I go through modifying all these things or basically turning off all these things when there's a theme that will do that? So let's do that. Let's do theme void. And so theme void will turn off a lot of the theming. And so there we are, right? That turns off everything. And I don't know. Versus that. Which position do you want to start from, right? So I will hold off on messing with the theme, the rest of the theming stuff. Tell me in the chat whether you want to see me start with theme void, which again cleared everything out, or the default, which is theme gray. And so I could use either of those. Put in the chat and let me know if you'd rather see me start with theme void or theme gray, okay? And we'll come back to that. But for now, let's set that to the side. We've implemented the color scheme and we've formatted for the most part and placed the legend. And now we want to insert the numbers into the bars and color those numbers accordingly, okay? So to insert text, we're going to use geom text, all right? And so we'll come back down here. I can get rid of this filter and we'll do geom underscore text and we'll do label, or I guess I could do that back up here in ggplot, right? I could then do a label equals label. And I need to add a plus sign here. And now what we get is the label, but it's getting positioned on the x-axis according to the percent of that label, right? So again, our x aesthetic is the percent. And so at that percent value, it's placing the label, which isn't what we want, right? This first bar is probably, is 38, right? And so what we want is like the 38 over here on the left, okay? And so we're gonna have to make a separate column to place the label, okay? So a separate column for the x-axis placement on the label. So to get ready to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this label equals label aesthetic, and I'm gonna put that down here in geom text. We'll do AES, label equals label. Nothing changed, it still looks bad. But what we wanna do is we want, like, again, speed that 38, that's right here at 38 right now. Maybe we want that at like 5, right? And then we want 41 at like 38 plus 5, right? So that's the 41 there. And it's actually in a pretty good place. But then like the 6 should be here, the 12 should be here, and then actually like that 3, anything less than 4% should go away, okay? So let's do that first. Let's go ahead, insert numbers into bars, remove values under 4%, and then color the numbers accordingly. Okay, we need to then also fix x-axis placement. All right, so let's start by removing the values under 4%. And again, we're going to come back up here, and where we have, let's see what this is looking like here. So again, we have label, and label is currently a double, but that could be a character. And so let's go ahead and insert into this mutate statement a label. We're going to change label, and we'll do if else label under 4. Then we're going to put double quotes. Otherwise, we'll do as dot character label. Okay. And so now what we see is like old maid hate it goes away, right? And everything else then becomes a character. And so now if I insert this into the rest of the pipeline, I now see that I no longer have like that 3% that we had here before, right? For speed or spit, okay? Cool, all right. So that was easy. Now for the harder thing of placing the x-axis position, right? And so what we had seen, if I go ahead and push this back, that we have label and percent. And so I'd like to make another column, which would be a label x. And let's see, how are we going to do this? We are going to do this by let's see. So it's already going to be in order from love it, like it, dislike it, hate it, not sure. And what we could then do would be like cumulative sum on percent. Yeah, let's see what that does for us. And then for geom text, our x isn't going to be percent. It's going to be the label underscore x, right? So again, if we run this, it's cumulative. It's getting a cumulative sum across all the values. But this we want to be by game. Okay. And so now what we see is that we're summing up. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So it adds up to 100 within each game. And so now what we have is we have the values right on the values, right? And so, but I want it kind of left justified, not right justified, for the lack of a better phrase. So how would we do that? I'm going to take, let's see. Let's see. If we say we have, well, let's take this, right? So we've got 38, 41, 6, 12, 3. So if we have 38, 41, 6, 12, and 3. So these are like the values that we would find for speed or spit in the percent column, right? So if I did like cum sum on x, we're going to get those values. But what I'd really like would be like 5 and then, 5 plus cum sum of x, right? But that's going to go off the right side, and we're going to have one too many values here, right? And so let's see, what could we do? We could do x and like length of x minus 1. So length of x minus 1 is going to be 4, right? And so then if we ran this, that's weird. Oh, that's only giving me that. And I want to, okay. Okay, let me explain what's happening. So when I do this x with the brackets, I get a single value 12, right? And so basically what it's then doing is cum sum of 12, which is not what I want. I want the cum sum except for the last thing, right? So basically I want cum sum x, and I want everything from 1 to length of x minus 1, which gets me those values, right? So if you kind of look up here, and then if we add 5 to that, right, we go 43, 84, 90, 102, and then we can do 5 plus that, right? And so then those would be our 5 placement values, okay? Yeah, thanks, Mike. Great, so Juan comments, in Windows install Power Toys to obtain colors like what I've got. Cool. All right, so where were we? All right, so that is going to be label X, right? So where I have X, I'm going to want to put percent. All right, and so we'll go ahead and remove this. And then again, instead of X, we want percent. And we'll do percent here as well. All right. And it's upset with me. Oh, because that should be percent. Okay, there we go. And then we have this. And so I'm going to rename this 5 to be nudge. I'll say X nudge. And yeah. All right. So we need to define X nudge somewhere, right? And X nudge isn't found. So let's come back up here. And I think 5 is too big. So let's do nudge equals 2. And I need to bring this all together. And like so. I'm noticing a problem that my not sure and dislike columns are flipped. The values in them are flipped. So that's not good. All right, but otherwise, that's pretty decent, right? So maybe I'll up the nudge to 3. Okay, but my not sure and my dislike values are flipped. And I think that might be because it hasn't been ordered by the sentiment, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close out this mutate and then do arrange by sentiment. Yep. And then pipe that into mutate. And there we go. So again, I had, just to explain what I had, this label X was defined as part of this mutate, whereas defining sentiment as a factor. And I did this cumulative sum across values of sentiment within each game. But I didn't sort the data by the factor yet. And so that's what I'm doing here with this arranged sentiment. So that now we can get the cumulative sum to start with love going to hate rather than being in the default order that they had originally, okay? And so now what we get is the numbers in a pretty good place. As we change the size of the font, we might tweak things a little bit and kind of move things around. But that's pretty good. The other thing that I said I wanted to do was color the numbers accordingly. And so what we can do is we can then do what? We'll do within geom text, we'll do color equals sentiment. So we're going to color the data by the sentiment, color the text by the sentiment, right? So that looks horrible, right? But you can see that our color has now figured into the legend, right? And so we can do a scale color manual. And again, we'll do name equals null. And then we will then do values. And again, going from left to right, we're going to have white, white, black, black, white. So we can do white, white, black, black, white. And so now we have our text, white, white, black, black, white, right? Cool. One thing that, as I was writing these words out, occurred to me, this is up here in the scale fill manual, we're using hexadecimal, and here we're using the named colors. For your reference, the hexadecimal for white is a bunch of 6 Fs, and for black is six zeros, okay? Whether you use the hexadecimal or name, it's up to you. For simple things like black and white, it's easiest to write it out. But for these more custom colors, the actual hexadecimal is pretty nice as well, okay? So we don't want these A's in the legend though. And so to turn that off, I'm gonna come back up to geom text and we'll do show.legend equals false. And so now that text goes away from being inside of the legend. Okay, cool. All right. So we got the text in. That's great. And yeah, now we're ready to do the titles and other formatting. Maybe I'll make other formatting a sixth item. All right. So again, what we're working on is recreating this horizontal stacked bar plot from a YouGov article on how Americans feel about 30 different card games. Naturally, we're doing this within our studio in R using tools from the tidyverse. And we're going to now focus on the titles, right? Things like their title being bolded, but also embedding color for love and like. They have this subtitle and this caption. The caption is italicized, right? And yeah, so let's go ahead and I'm going to be lazy and copy the titles. And we'll do that down here. I'll go ahead and put that after my scale color manual. I'll do labs and we'll plop that in. And then I'll also come back here and get this caption note. All right. And the first label lab will be title and put those in quotes, and then subtitle equaling this, and then caption equaling that. Okay. Cool. So we need to add a plus to the end of this. And so now we see that we have our titles, right? Title, subtitle, and our caption down here at the bottom. There's a few things we're going to do to clean this up. One of the first things that annoys me is that these titles, the title and the subtitle, are left justified on the panel, right? Whereas the caption is right justified on the panel, right? So I'd like it to be, all of these to be left justified on the plot. And so to do that, down here in theme, we could do plot.title.position equals plot. And then we could also do plot.caption.position equals plot. And so that's going to pull the title and the subtitle to the left. And it's hard to see here, but it pulls the caption a little bit to the right. Yeah. And to make the caption then left justified, we'll come in here and we'll do plot.caption equals element text. We'll do hjust equals 0. And so now we see that that pulls it to be left justified. And let's go ahead, because we're already futzing with the caption, make it italicized. So we'll then do face equals italic. And so now we have our italicized caption, right? Cool, winning. All right, now let's think about our title. And here we can do plot.title equals element text, face equals bold. And so now it's been bolded. And our subtitle is going off the right side of the screen, right? So I'm not such a fan of that. So let's go ahead and use ggtext. That's another great package that I really enjoy using. We'll do library ggtext. And library ggtext allows us to use Markdown or HTML markup in our text elements. So we can do that down here like in plot title, or maybe we'll start with plot subtitle. And we'll do element text box simple. And what we find is that that will automatically wrap the subtitle for us, right? So I don't have to worry about figuring out where to put in line breaks and things. And if I change the font size to make it smaller like theirs, I don't have to move those line breaks around, okay? The other thing it will allow us to do is to color love or like, which is not something we can do with element text, right? So let's go ahead and do that in title. We'll do element text box simple. And it doesn't change a lot. I think it got rid of a bit of margin from below the text. But what we'll do is come back here. And so where we have like and love, we can put in a span tag, right? And in here then, I'm going to say style equals, and then in single quotes, because we already have double quotes, I'll then do color colon, and I'm going to grab this hexadecimal, semicolon quote, and I think my span needs to be the opposite. No, that's right. Oh, it's unhappy with me. Oh, because I put a double quote rather than a single quote. Cool. And so now you'll see that love is purple, right? That darker purple, right? Cool. And so now we want to do the same thing with like. And because that's a lot to type and I already do a great job of making typos, I'm going to copy this and use that to replace like, and then put like in here. And we'll replace that hexadecimal with this. And so now you see we've got love and like matching the colors as they are in the legend. Okay, cool. One other thing that I like to do is to do my best to match the font. The font that I believe YouGov uses is called Graphic. I think we can use Franklin to get it pretty close. And so to do that, to use a different font, we'll do library show text. And then we're going to add the Franklin font from Google Fonts. So we'll do font, add Google, and then it's called Libre Franklin. And then the family name is going to be Franklin, right? And then we'll do show text opts DPI equals 300. So that's going to be the resolution. And then we'll do show text auto. And that auto function, show text auto, will load all this stuff. So if I run these three functions, I can then come down and in my theme function, I can then do text equals element text, and then we'll do family equals Franklin. And so now we have the Franklin font instead of Arial or whatever font I was using by default. Okay, and so it's coming together, I think, pretty nicely. And so I had asked if people wanted to use theme void or the default theme gray for going forward. Nobody said anything. Maybe I will start with theme gray, because I feel like theme gray is an easier place to start because people see this and they see what they like or they don't like, and then they can remove it, versus kind of being in like a dark room with like theme void, not really sure what to add or what to remove. So I'm going to roll with this. So the first thing I'm going to do is to get rid of the background, which is gray with those white grid lines. It also has an expansion added all the way around. And so, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll do plot.grid or panel.grid. And we'll do element blank. Oh, I opened the file too quickly. There we go. So now we've gotten rid of the grid lines in the back. We could also then do panel.background, element blank. That clears out the white background. But as we saw from having that gray in there, there's space all the way around. And so we can get rid of that by doing chord Cartesian, and we'll then do expand equals false. And that then removes that extra padding all the way around. You can see that if I turn back on the background color, I think there's some stuff here because of my nudge. That will probably want to end up moving the nudge to the left. So let's try that. If I move nudge to say 2, then that gets smaller, right? So that's fine, because there's a bit of a margin to the right of this anyway, and we'll just kind of incorporate that as part of that. All right, cool. Great. So now let's go ahead and get rid of the X and Y axis labels. And so like on the X axis, we had %. I can do null to get rid of those. On the Y, we have game. Again, I can do null to get rid of that. And so again, that frees up some space. We also don't want these values on the X axis. We also don't want the tick marks on the Y or X axis. So then we can go ahead and turn off the background again, and we'll do axis.ticks equals element blank. That got rid of the tick marks. Let's go ahead and get rid of the x-axis text. So that's going to be axis.text.x equals element blank. And that gets rid of the text on the x-axis, right? So Robert asks, would position equals stack within geom text work? I think it would. But I think it's going to put like the 38 here, the 41 here, the 6 here, the 12 here, and whatever, right? Versus putting it on the left side. Let's see. Position. You want to try it? Let's see. Let me see if I can do this real quick. So geom text, thanks for asking that question. X equals %, Y equals, oh, then we'll do label equals label. And then we'll do position equals position stack. X is % label label. I'm not sure what it's doing. So it seems to have scrubbed off the 38. It's not, or maybe that's the reverse, right? Let's see, where do we have? There we go. So that's that. And then if we did reverse equals true, and then I think they had vjust. If we did 0, this is looking better. So 0 left justifies it. If I did like 0.1, moves it over. Like this is getting it closer, right? I think we could futz with that vjust a little bit. One thing I'm seeing though is that, you know, like in theirs, everything is kind of left justified to the same value on the x-axis, right? And I think to get it to look like we had it, or like they have it, I think we'd have to do kind of similar types of manipulations. But I think you could definitely get there using your suggestion with position stack on position. It's also going to take some futzing with the data, kind of like what we had to do with our solution here. But I think you can get pretty close. So thanks for asking that, Robert. Yeah. So there's many ways to do the same type of thing, right? Okay, so we were bringing in that Franklin font, or we we cleaned up these titles, right? And now what I want to do is go ahead and try to get things to match theirs as much as possible. So let's go ahead and make our title bigger. And so plot title, let's do like size equals 13. I think that may have gotten smaller. Let's do 15. All right. And I think that's pretty good. One thing I'm noticing is that their bold is more bold than my bold. And so something that I've done in a previous episode is that when you're bringing things in from Google Fonts, you can set the bold weight to something else. So let's see. I think the default is 800. So if we make it 900, that will make it more bold, right? Kind of like we see here. I notice it does some weird things with the kerning, the spacing between the words. There's a way to fix that that we'll get to here in a minute, but I think that looks pretty good. And yeah, so let's think about the subtitle now, which is smaller. So we'll do plot subtitle, size equals 10. Could probably be even smaller. Let's do 8. Oh, let's take that up to say 8.5. All right, so that really screws things up. What I find helps in these cases is to save and close and try again. So sometimes the visualization stuff using show text gets a bit wonky. And what I find, like I said, is often to quit and restart RStudio, rerun everything, and things look better, right? So that's cool. And so then I think the font size on our subtitle is pretty good. We need a bit of a margin at the top of the subtitle. So I'll go ahead and do margin equals margin T equals 10. That brings it down maybe too far. Let's make that maybe 8. That's cool. And then we might want the line height to be a little bit wider. So we'll do line height 1.1. Oh, it actually shrunk it. So let's take it to say 1.4. And that's pretty good separation. So here also, I'm noticing that the regular font of the subtitle is a little bit lighter than theirs. And so we can come back up here with this bold weight and do regular weight. And actually, so it's usually 400. And let's make it say 500. It made my title not bold. Why did it do that? Face bold. Oh, I made that 9 instead of 900. All right, there we go. And so that also made the subtitle more bold as well, right? And yeah, I think that looks pretty spot on. Then let's think about our caption. And our font for the caption is too big. So let's go ahead and do down here, plot.caption element text, and we'll do size equals 8. And I think that matches pretty well. Now let's think about our axis text. And it seems a little bit bigger than theirs. And I think it's probably that 8.5. So we'll do axis text dot y equals element text. And then we'll do size equals 8.5. Maybe that's too big. Let's make it 8. think that's nice. All right. And let's see. Let's think about our legend, and the legend text is probably too big, right? It's also kind of separated from the key, right? So if you look at this, like the key and hate, there's more space to the left than there is to the right of the key. So let's go ahead and shrink the font. So that will be back up here. I like to put similar type of theme arguments together. So we'll do legend.text equals element text. Let's do size equals 8. And I think that shrinks it down pretty nicely. Now we want to think about like the margin on either side of our text. So if we do legend text, and then we do like margin equals margin, L equals, let's try 0 just to be silly, R equals 3. Okay, so that gets us the disproportional spacing, right? And so let's go ahead and increase that to be, say, like 1, and then decrease the R to be 2. And I think that's good. I like that. And to kind of properly space that, let's go ahead and add some space below our subtitle. So we already did margin T equals 8. And then let's do B equals 5 to add some bottom margin. All right, so that brought it down maybe a little too far. So let's maybe make this 4. That's good. And then the legend has a margin below it. And so let's go ahead and remove some of that margin. So I guess we could have put legend margin on top or the bottom, whatever. Legend dot margin equals margin, B equals 0. It's not 0, but let's try that and see what it looks like. So that really shrunk it. I wonder if it's, let's see. I wonder if it's box margin. Nope, that wasn't right either. All right, we'll do margin B equals 0. And then add margin back to the top. And maybe to keep things simple, I'll remove that B equals 4 from subtitle. And then here we'll do T equals 5. Okay, that didn't do much. Let's do 10. Okay, that's good. But we still have this space underneath. Also, there should be some left margin to push love it over to the right a smidge. So we'll do L equals 5. So that moves that over. Maybe we can go up to 10. Okay. But there's too much space below it. I could do like minus 10, and that brings it up. Let's do minus 5. All right, let's do minus 8, and I think I'm going to call that good. Oh. Did that work? No. All right. Minus 11. Oh, it's bringing it closer. Minus 5. Okay, let's make it minus 3. All right. All right, good. Okay, great. Now, after all that, let's turn our attention to the bars themselves, right? Like that, the font is still the previous sans serif font, and it's big, right? So to get the Franklin font in, we need to come back to geom text, and then we can do family equals Franklin. So again, the font in geom text is handled separately from the font in theme. And so now we have that font, but of course it's big. And so let's come back to geom text, and we'll do size equals, let's say 9, and we can do size.unit equals pt. So I want that to be like a 9-point font. All right, so it made it smaller. I think we could go a little bit smaller, and let's bring that down to say 8. And I think that's pretty good. I'm thinking about the spacing here. Kind of the position I think is pretty good as well. It could probably be to the right ever so slightly. So my nudge is 2. Let's do like 2.25. And I think that's good. Now there is a bit of margin above the caption to push the bars up, right? So let's see, we had plot caption, and then we could do margin equals margin, and T, let's do 10. Okay, it could go up more. And that brings that up maybe a little bit too much. So I had it at 15, let's do 12. And I think that's good. And so I'm noticing that their bars are more narrow than mine. I forget the argument for that. I think it's width. Yeah, width. And so let's see. Down here, it'll tell us what the default is, I think. By default, set to 90% of the resolution of the data. So I think if we do geom call, and then we do width equals 0.8, that should be 80% of the data. Yeah. And so that makes it thin, maybe too thin. Let's, I don't know, go to 85. I think that's good. So let's think about the margins around the plot. I think they look pretty good. Maybe the right margin is a little bit too wide, as we talked about in mine. Again, this is mine. I know they're starting to look really similar to each other, which is awesome. Also, I noticed like this, the kings in the corner is pushed in a bit. So like the axis text Y, we could do margin equals margin L equals 3. And so then that here kicks the kings in the corner to the right just a bit, right? Okay, so then let's look at the plot margin so that we can reduce the right-hand size margin, which is probably overkill at this point, but hey, why stop here? So plot.margin equals margin. T, there is a default size up there. I'm not sure what it is. Let's try 3. L or R equals 0, B equals 3, L equals 3. And we can adjust accordingly. So I think we need to drop the top or increase the top a bit. Maybe it'll do 5. All right, 4. And then our right-hand margin. That looks good. Our bottom could go up a hair to 4. That's good. And then I think our left needs to come over a couple notches. And let's go up to 5. I think that's good. Great. So here we are. Here are the two versions of the plot next to each other. And I think there's some subtle differences that we commented on, namely like in the order of some of the games. And I think we could go back and forth on what they were using to order things. Some things like spades and euchre, our data just look different than theirs, and I'm not totally sure what that's about. So anyway, on the whole, I think we've done a pretty nice job of recreating this plot. I really do thank Robert for your question about using position equals stack within geom text. I think that's something to really think about. I think we would still need to do something to have kind of a common spacing across, like an absolute spacing. I think what vjust does is more of like a relative spacing. But that's something that I'm going to be thinking about as I kind of continue on. But again, mine is on the right. Theirs is on the left. And I'm pretty happy with how this all came together. And I really appreciate, like I said, your all's feedback as we've gone through this episode. I know this one has been a little bit longer than some of the others along the way. I really appreciate you sticking with it and watching along the way. Again, if you want to see the article that I'm drawing this from, it's from this YouGov article. And also, if you want to learn more about the workshop, the 5-week workshop that I'm going to be offering in the month of September, you can go there. And if you want to sign up for the mailing list so that you can see what types of visualizations are going to be coming down the pipe in future episodes here of Code Club on these live streams, you can subscribe to that newsletter as well. All right. Again, thanks everyone, and we'll see you hopefully next week for another episode of Code Club. Please tell your friends about what we're doing here so that they can come along and enjoy